Welcome back. We are going to be learning about something called for loops today. And so the learning target is that you can effectively use these type of loops to simplify repetitive tasks. So just a word, something to note is that there's actually two different types of loops that we're going to be learning. We're going to learn about for loops today, and the next lesson is going to be something called while loops. Okay, in a for loop, you see that there is, this is the structure of a loop. You say for, and notice that the blue are keywords here. For I in range 4, colon, tab here, print I. Okay, so it's a couple things to note. First of all, these I's, those are something called, that's an iteration variable. This is the thing that changes each time through the loop, okay? And by the way, this will output 0, 1, 2, and 3. So this I right here is the iteration variable. Now, notice that the iteration variable, so all you're doing through this loop is you're printing what the value of the iteration variable is. So as you go through this loop, it's just letting you know what is the value of I, because you're just saying print the iteration variable I. Notice that it starts at 0, not at 1. So it's a lot like the index values that we had for lists and strings, where it starts counting at 0, which is kind of tricky. There's two numbers that you have to get used to in a for loop. That is the iteration variable, or the value of the iteration variable as it goes through, and the range value. The range value tells you how many times the loop will run. So this loop will run 4 times. And each time it runs, it's going to give you the value of the iteration variable as it goes through. Okay? Okay, so you don't have to use I as the iteration variable as you go through the loop. So this one says for I in range 5, print I, and this outputs 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the 5 values of the iteration variable as it goes through. You don't have to use I in the range statement. You could use anything. So let me give you an example. Instead of I, you could use the word number. So you can use anything there as long as it's some sort of letters. So you could say for X in range 5, you could say for words in range 10. This one says for number in range 5, print number, and then it does the same thing. So let's go back to the previous slide. You said for I in range 5, print I. The same thing here, for number in range 5, print number. It gets the same output here. Okay. One other thing to note is that you actually don't have to use the value of the iteration variable inside there. Now notice, it should have said since I, oops, let's change that right now. Since I is not used in the body of the loop, the action print is just repeated 5 times. So if they say for I in range 5, do an action, this action will be done 5 times, and it didn't have to use it didn't have anything to do with the iteration variable. So you can use the iteration variable in your loop, or you don't have to. But the structure of the loop says for something in range some number, do a certain action. Okay, so sometimes we want to use the iteration variable in there, sometimes we don't. Okay, so what I would like you to do right now is go ahead and check yourself using the quizzes code, and you should be able to answer questions 1 to 4 right now. Okay, the next thing I want to cover is something that the for loop is really useful for, and that's to do some mathematics inside of the loop. So the way that you would do this is you would initialize a variable outside the loop. So I would say initialize means to give it a starting value. So I said X is a variable, and I set that equal to 10. And I say I want this loop to run 4 times. And each time through the loop, and I just use the standard for I in range. I'm not going to use the iteration variable inside of my loop, so I'm just going to write that standard part of the loop in there. But I want it to go 4 times. I want the loop to run 4 times. And each time through the loop, every piece of the indented block here, notice lines 3 and 4 are indented. So those are both going to run 1 and then 2, and then it's going to restart the loop again. So each time through the loop, I'm going to have X set equal to X plus 1. All that does right there is it adds 1 more to X. So at that present time right there, that becomes X becomes 11 because X was 10 before. X plus 1 is 11. I'm going to store that back into X. I'm going to reassign that to X. And then I'm going to ask in line 4 to print X. And so what this will do is when it gets to line 4, in the first time through the loop, it will print 11. The next time through the loop, it stores X as 12. and then it prints off 12. The next time, so the loop has run twice at this point. The next time through the loop, it stores x as 13, and it prints off 13. And the last time through the loop, it stores x as 14, and then it prints off 14. Okay, so that's a way that you can do mathematics inside the loop here. So in the end, the output will be 11, 12, 13, and 14. Now, if I had reversed lines 4 and 3, if I printed x as the first action inside the loop, it would give me the value of 10, then 11, and then 12, and then 13, because it would be printing the 10 value and then adding 1. So it would have gone 10, 11, 12, 13 instead of 11, 12, 13, 14. So the action blocks inside the loop, as designated by the tabs here, they tell us the order in which you want those actions done before the loop starts repeating itself. Notice I didn't use an I in it, I used the X which I initiated outside the loop. Okay? This should allow you to answer the questions 5 through 7 in the quizzes. Okay, the next thing I want to talk to you about is what happens when you put two numbers inside of the range. So there's actually, we've been looking at if we put one number in, but what happens if there's ways that we can put 2 and even 3 values inside of the range here. So this is just asking you, so x is your iteration variable here, and I just ask you to print out the value of x so that the loop only does one thing right now, is it's printing out the value of the iteration variable as it goes through it. So for x, so consider that like a number. So for the number in the range 0 to 5, print out the value of that number. Okay, so this is what you would get as an output, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I just want you to notice some things, and then I'm going to define them for you. If I say for x in range 1 to 7, print out x, it gives me, it starts at 1, and then it goes up until 6. Okay, so if I go 0 to 5, it goes from 0 to 4. If I say 1 to 7, it goes from 1 to 6. And finally, if I have 3 numbers in the range, so I should say from 1 to 10, with 2 as my last, these are called arguments here, so they're separated by commas, notice that. It'll print out 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Okay, so you might see a pattern here. Okay, so, and finally, if I have 3 numbers here, but the last number is negative, notice that in this case, the first number that I put is larger than the second number. And that's because it's working backwards. So we have 30, 27, 24, 21, 18, 15, and 12. So it's starting at 30. It's going until, looks like almost till 10, and going backwards by 3 each time. So the last parameter tells you to go, the negative tells you to go backwards. It's a decreasing sequence, like subtractive sequence. And that's why the first number is larger than the second number. Here, the first number is smaller than the second number, and it's counting up by 2 until just before we get to the second number, but not including the second number. Whereas if you just have 2 numbers, it starts at the first number and excludes the last number. It goes right before you get to the last number, a lot like string slicing. So if you have a single number here, then that number will indicate the end of your range that you want. So for I in range 5 means that the loop runs 5 times. If you have 2 numbers, the first number indicates the start and the second number indicates the end. And notice that the start is always inclusive, meaning it's included, and the end is always exclusive, meaning it's not included or excluded. If you have 3 numbers, the first number is the start, the second number is the end, and the last number is the step or the change by number. And if it's negative, it means that it will subtract that number. If it's positive, it will mean it will add that number each time. Okay, and this should allow you to answer the remaining questions on the Check for Understanding quiz. All right,